So you'll want to use the invitation. It's there over in the announcements section. And we'll get started here. Okay? We should have far more of us here, but next semester this will have to end. A grand experiment. Too bad. All right. Are you guys getting logged in? Good. Okay. Oh, it is. Okay. Oh, I'm going to make sure I'm recording on this machine. Okay, good. Okay. All right. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start. We will have some of us who will join us, any who join us here in the classroom on the ground-based day, which is where they should be on Mondays. We'll need to log in, and because the overhead projectors have yet to be repaired such that folk like me can get in and use them. So we're over on week 3. This is really our first meeting. We had Labor Day, which is the 3rd, and then the first week, the week 0 we didn't have any class, and then I'm trying to remember what we had to do. There was something that happened on the 1st, and then of course the 3rd was Labor Day, and here we are today. So we're now kind of in that rhythm where we will be meeting physically on Mondays. And if you go over to if you take a look at please go to the modules section, and you'll see what you've got ahead of you for the week. And you've got this this case follow-up over on pages 244 to 246, and then a management decision problem. And what you'll need to do is go ahead and log in. The projector's not working, so go ahead and log in. Go to the announcements and then log into the screencast so you can see what's happening. Okay? All right. Now, then you've got Loudon Chapter 3, and that's where we're at. Now, I've got some cases that are ahead of that, and I understand, and then one that I think is behind that in terms of I'm really trying to stay with the themes I think that kind of fit with each chapter, and the authors don't necessarily always throw those in there for us. Now, the textbook, and I want to, and since we're doing the Chapter 3, that's kind of about where I'm at in terms of doing some of the lecture piece of all of this. And it's important for us to understand that in information systems, we work a whole lot with templates, we work a whole lot with algorithms. And for example, one of the reasons that we have you learn the Microsoft Office Productivity Suite, which is Word, Excel, Access, PowerPoint, is that productivity suite, that's kind of the granddaddy or grandmama of them all. And once you learn to work them, you'll just kind of feel you'll be able to work your way through any type of application of that sort. It's, as I've said before, it's like learning to drive. Now, on top of all of that is this issue, which is what this course is about, of how do we tie all these systems and technologies together? How do we make sure that they all work? And that's where we're going to see a paradigm today, or a theoretical construct, or an approach, a template that helps us put that into some perspective. And we're going to look at that using Porter's 5 forces, which is a very well-known Porter's 5 forces, which is a very well-known strategic management approach. And it works well with technology because the major disruptors that occur or things that change the game in industry is technology. Right now I'm taking a course on fintech, which is just amazing stuff. One of them you might have heard of it is a technique called blockchain. And what blockchain does, it's an algorithm, and it serves as an intermediary between a payee and a recipient, or an account owner and their account, and you have to solve the algorithm in order to access that other side of the wall. And this is particularly in China, in China particularly, this has really taken off. You know, those of us in the United States who use PayPal, right? If you look at like the Chinese economy, up until the past 10 years, people did business with cash, or they did business by barter. Literally, you trade a chicken for a cow or whatever. If you wanted a new car, you went down with a wad of money and put it down, because they didn't have banks, they didn't have the financial system that we have in this country, or in most Western countries, well, all Western countries. So if you don't have banks and you don't have mortgage companies and things of that nature, you do business by cash. Well, what's happened is they've kind of jumped ahead of everybody by using this thing called fintech with a whole variety of products and services. Now, to give you an example of something that might make sense to all of us would be Quicken Loans, okay? Rocket mortgages. My wife and I bought a house about 2 years, it's been about a year and a half ago. And just to see, I said, okay, why don't we go over to Quicken Loans and see what they'll approve us for and how long it takes. Let's see if they really are that good. Well, they had a system for me to upload my stuff encrypted, all my information, all the stuff that they want to know, you know, how long you've been working, how much you make, and all that stuff. Then I guess I would say within maybe 12 hours, I had a letter of credit to go buy a home, a guarantee. Now, I can tell you from having built and bought homes throughout my life, my first one I built was I was 21. I've never, ever, ever, ever seen the process go that fast. Now, I've not had to use it for some reason. I haven't had to borrow, but in a long time. But I was shocked at how fast that was done. And they had people lined up to come out and do inspection, blah, blah, all the stuff. And this is all electronic. And I was just shocked because I didn't have to go to the bank or go to the mortgage company and meet with a bunch of people and talk with them. It was there. The same thing is happening. Now, PayPal is another example of that. The same thing is happening in the personal loan and personal finance industry, where there are banks out there that utilize technology to bypass intermediaries. Financial intermediary, a bank, a broker, your real estate agent. The house that we bought, that we found, I found it on, I went over to Zillow, and the house had just been listed. I drove over there. I was the first person there. Boom. It was done. And the agent was amazed. He said, I just don't believe I've never sold a house before I really ever showed it. I said, well, you just have. So you have those tools like Zulia, Trulio, all of those kinds of intermediate, those kinds of tools that remove intermediaries. And when you remove financial intermediaries, essentially you can do things cheaper. Now, what's really amazing to me, and I've seen it on some commercials, is a place called Carvana, and they let you go out and search for a car. And if you find the car and you qualify, blah, 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 then they'll sell you the car. You pay them online, they deliver, or you get a loan online, they deliver the car to your house, which just absolutely blows my mind. But that's what we're going to see with these technologies, because they're disruptive. And we need to find a way to put that into some kind of context. Now, in order to really understand a lot of this, and whoever there is drinking beer, I'm going to close you off there. It's important to understand that technology pretty much flattens the globe. It pretty much puts everybody on the same page in terms of competition, especially dealing with intellectual property and intellectual processes like engineering, software development, etc. We have, when our students graduate now from the computer science program, for example, the really good ones go to work for people like Facebook, Google, etc. And those companies tell them, don't move out here. There's nowhere for you to live that you can afford, because Silicon Valley and housing in Northern California is just off the roof. You can rent an apartment for about $5,000 a month. So you and 8 other people might be able to afford it. So they tell people just stay home and work remote and have a remote presence. Again, that's one of those things that's a game changer. Before I came here, I was at a university that we were a virtual school, and we were fully accredited, and we offered just simply primarily doctoral programs, and I had faculty from all over the world. So when we'd have a committee meeting, I might have people from 8 or 6, 7, maybe as many as 8 or 9 time zones who were on that committee. And basically at that point then, the idea that I'm tethered to this particular campus or this particular set of people ends all of that business. So technology is a highly disruptive force. It changes things. And so one of the ways we try to understand that is by utilizing this template that's provided by Porter. Now, I'm over in the textbook, and you'll see it now. Again, here's something else, all right? I'm using a book. Probably many of you have utilized digital textbooks, and I use a thing called Bible Source, which will if a publisher will give me a desk copy, complimentary copy, they give it to me in e-form. And I love digital text, and anything else I might buy, I'll usually either get it from Amazon or I'll buy it through Vital Source and put that thing on there, because boom, I've got the text that's with me wherever I go. I don't carry this silly thing around, etc. I can do searches. So that's folks like Vital Source, Amazon, to a certain extent Barnes and Noble, but they've kind of been shoved beside, are really changing the way that things work. And today, when I go look for a textbook, for example, when I first started in the old days, I'd call the textbook rep at a particular company, Prentice Hall, McGraw-Hill, whatever, and say, what do you got in this and that? And they might call me and send me here, and we might have some conversations. They might mail me a catalog. I don't get the catalogs anymore because those sales rep positions are gone. I go to their website, I make the choices, I make the decisions, and away we go. Well, let's look at this for just a moment, and we'll talk about Porter's competitive model, okay? And they're going to walk us through and just introduce them to us, the competitive forces model, okay? Now, if you look over here, and you're going to see this over on page 96, part 1, figure 3.8. When we talk about company strategy, there are two trains of thought. One is what I would call them nature versus nurture. And you say, what do you mean? There are those companies whose strategic orientation, either understood or not understood, or explicit or tacit, is based on the idea of we have superior people or a superior product design or both, which gives us a competitive position, i.e. a niche that cannot easily be assaulted, okay? And that's kind of the nurture idea, the idea that I have such good people that nobody will beat us. Google has a lot of that, and Amazon to a certain extent, some of that. But Google and Apple, particularly because they were founded by a couple of very bright individuals, and they believe that because they have superior brain power, no one will take them down. Trust me. These great firms that you study now in 20, 25, 30 years, they probably won't be around. The Fortune 500 turns over about 80% every 20 years. But then you have what I would call not the nurture, but the nature, and that is a company's competitive position is dictated a lot by the environment in which it works. Okay? And the extent to which it has some threats from that environment or things that will induce it. And you can see here, they provide you that competitive forces model. Now, the model is pretty easy to see. For example, substitute products. For example, customers. Let's take substitute products. In your lifetime, well, way before you were born, the music industry, okay, the popular music industry, the publishing houses, they would sell albums. They would sell, or even before that, they sold records. And they'd have one song that was on top of what they would call the A side would be the song that was played on the radio. And on the B side would be some song that they just recorded, so they'd have two recordings there. They would do the same thing with albums. They'd put one or two, three, maybe three really good songs, and you'd have to buy the whole album. Okay. Today, what do? You're like me. You use an aggregator, and you grab the stuff you want and you download it, or you go to YouTube and you watch it and you see it, and that way you don't have to buy a whole album. So that the technology has essentially served up as a substitute product, taking that content, okay, that was there, and putting it into that new medium. A good example of that are Hulu and Netflix. Which Hulu is now doing its own original programming. So not only has Hulu said, hey, you can stream movies from the internet, but Hulu now says, hey, we make movies too. So take a look at some of our original content. We're just not selling you what everybody else makes. Same thing now with Amazon. And so the people who are in these traditional firms, the traditional publishing houses, or if you're or your ABC, NBC, or CBS, or your Fox, or you're one of these studios, this isn't an easy time for you because you've got these folks who can produce content and put it on the net, and they don't have to worry. If ABC, CBS, or NBC put a production on during their regular schedule, they have to have their key criteria is market share. Typically in the 18 to 49-year-old, between that cohort of people are between 18 and 49, because that's the people that have the most disposable income. And if you hook them and they stay customers, you got them. And so advertisers want those folks. It costs, so you have to have a certain number of people for that to work. Now, before the internet, and I'll take late night programming, which has always been an interesting thing to me. Before the internet, if you turned on the TV at 11 o'clock at night on any weeknight, 1/3 of every human being who had TV on was watching Johnny Carson. Okay? So he was averaging 10, 15, 20 million people a night. Now, on a good night, Jimmy Fallon might get 2 million people, maybe 3. So that changes the game. And so that's why you see him trying to be more net friendly, so he can take snippets and put them online and things of that nature. Same thing with Conan and the guy, Jimmy Kimmel at ABC. They're all scrambling because it's becoming so niched. Our cable, we have cable at home, and we have well over 400 channels. And I'm amazed at the stuff that's on all these different channels. It just blows my mind. I go, I don't know, how could you possibly watch all this? So the technology the internet, the ability to stream, has created substitute products and changed everything. It's the same story in the automotive business. And for example, the automobile business is undergoing a transformation because of all of the technology that's embedded now in a vehicle. Your car is really a big piece of floating software. Why? Well, they want to know if you what do you listen to? Okay, if you don't have like Sirius XM or something like that, and you plug your phone in and you play, what do you listen to? And that's all recorded. It's put this once you buy that vehicle, and you start inputting your data, your locational data, what you listen to, all of that. When you do that stuff's all there. They also monitor your driving habits. There's sensors on your brakes, sensors on your gas, etc. All of those things, so they know. It won't be too long before you'll get insurance, but it will be tailored basic on your driving record. So you'll get your bill, and your insurance company will say, by the way, on November the 3rd at 6 p.m., you were doing 60 in a 40-mile-an-hour zone, so we're going to have to lift your rate a little bit. And you're not going to be able to argue with them. And I'm convinced that at a certain point, you will probably have some type of technology that monitors your mood, your visual and haptic acuity, meaning are you sober or are you a little bit out of it? Are you driving when you're sleepy? That type of thing. And you will get an insurance bill told that is completely tailored. Now that brings up some privacy issues, and we're going to have some cases in here where we talk about privacy. Okay, but that's how the technology has become a substitute product for versus old line traditional competitors. Now, and you can see the key things are, and we'll just run you through this real quickly. The threat of new market entrants. How many people are going to be getting into this business? Okay, substitute products. How easily is it for people to buy a substitute product? Now, I'm here at OBU. I teach here at OBU. I think we have an enrollment of maybe 2,000 students, okay? Another Christian school, Liberty University, has 80,000 students, 50,000 of whom are online. Tough. That's a tough competitor. And that's some of these larger schools like Grand Canyon, like Liberty. You'll see there's Southern New Hampshire University. There are a whole bunch of them out there who are saying, we can offer you the same quality instruction, Sarah, right from your home, which is a game changer. And it really, I'm not sure we who are in education have really come to understand that. And one of the substitute products that's out there that I'm not sure that a few of us have it on our radar are these places like Udacity, Coursera, that will offer a full range of educational attainment products. Like if you take a course and you do a week or two, they'll sell you a badge, $50. If you do the course but not the major project, they'll sell you a course certificate and you pay them $150 or $200 or whatever. If you do the full course plus the project, basically you've done the course with them, then you pay them about $500, $300 to $500. Is that who cares about courses from Coursera? Nobody. But if it's the University of Michigan or it's Stanford, then you start to go, what? I can get, yeah, yep. That's a whole different kettle of fish. So you can see this issue of substitute products. The relative power, bargaining power of suppliers is another one of those, and Porter talks about that. How powerful are the people who supply me? Okay, a good example would be with the university here. A powerful supplier of us is the federal government. They monitor and regulate a lot of what we do. because if we don't obey, they will not let us offer student loans. And if we don't have student loans, we say goodbye. There is no school because folks will just go somewhere else. And so that's why you've seen in the United States in the past 20, 25 years, a tremendous drop in the number of so-called tech schools and they were idiots. They'd go out and they'd recruit dead people. Enrolling a dead person, of course, is not a good idea. They'd find homeless people, anybody they could get to get federal aid. And of course, a lot of them were involved with fraud cases and all kinds of issues. They're gone. My suppliers, how much control do they have? Do I have the ability to go get supply? If I need supplies, how much ability do I have to go get something else? I really didn't understand this until when I was a young person, and my dad was just starting to leave the wholesale food industry and started his own business. And we went out to see one of his friends, and this is a grocery store out in western Oklahoma. And we arrived. My dad worked for at the time, the third largest food wholesaler in the world, Fleming Company. And the gentleman was very nice. He'd been friends of our family a long time, and he was there. And my dad had delivered the news to him that we're not going to deliver food to you anymore. We're not going to take shipment from you. We're not going to sell you stuff because it's just not feasible. And this is a guy who'd rocked along with him as a supplier for all of he'd inherited the business from his father. And the guy starts crying. He says, well, what am I going to do? My dad said, I'm really not sure what you will do. And so they started wiping out all of these little grocery stores simply because they could do more sales in a constricted area like Oklahoma City or Tulsa or Kansas City, wherever, than they could do in all of western Oklahoma. So that issue of suppliers is really critical. Technology in terms of brain power, in terms of intellectual property and intellectual capital can overcome that issue, but not always. Then you have the issue of customers, okay? One of the things I've found when I go in and work with folks is that they have trouble identifying two things. One, what industry am I really in? And number two, who are my customers? And you say, well, that sounds stupid. How could that possibly be? But over the years, companies if they're not really on top of that, then they really just kind of keep rolling along, but they don't know who their customers are. They might not even know who their best customers are. And one of the legendary firms in this use of big data or unstructured data and using technology to understand customers was Capital One. The very first internet bank was Signet Bank that was based in Virginia. Capital One came in and said, we want to sell you a program and we think this will help you. And the people at Signet Bank said, what's that? They said, we want to plumb through all the data you have and we want to start to identify who are your most profitable customers. Now, in banking, this was a revolutionary idea because up to that point, banking was about avoiding risk, okay? Try to make sure that if you signed a loan to give somebody money to buy a car, they have a job and they'll pay it back. Capital One said we can kind of flip that and reverse it and go, hey, we're going to help you find the people who will be your best customers, will help you make the most money. And once we've identified them, your most profitable customer profiles, then we're going to start to offer them deals. And so Capital One did that. And as they did, they just got bigger and bigger. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but they run about 10,000 experiments a year where they'll take customer profiles and they'll take deal profiles. Like, would you like to borrow $20,000 for 5 years at 2.5%? Okay, great. No? Okay, well, how about $30,000 at 6 years at 6%? Or whatever that risk profile. They would even go to people who were at high interest rates, but who would pay, and they'd offer them a deal. And then suddenly you're getting that interest income, and you've got that you've got that person or that persons or whatever as a captive because you offered them a deal and they took it. And now once they've exhausted their credit worthiness, you're good to go. So there's a lot here for you to take a look at. But this Porter model is one that we use consistently to try to understand. Now, the last one I'm going to talk about are new market entrants, and that one is just who knows where that will all end. Okay, you read a lot about and you hear a lot about these things like autonomous vehicles, robots, drones, etc. All of those are efforts to solve what we call in distribution logistics the final mile problem. So once FedEx gets a bunch of stuff flown into Oklahoma City, okay, well, it's headed, there's a plane full of stuff, and it lands over here at the airport at Will Rogers, and then suddenly you have another problem. We have about 150 places to take this, okay, and it's supposed to be done today. So we call it the last mile problem. Well, how are we going to do that? Well, people like FedEx and UPS have highly sophisticated routing systems that they use to get this done. And that's how they try to overcome it. If you can automate those systems or have automated drivers or autonomous vehicles with a driver to intervene, boom, away you go. If you can drop stuff in with a drone or whatever, like Amazon thinks they want to do, they're going to perfect that to the point where you'll buy almost everything. I would say by the time you reach my age, retail will be highly specialized and it will be highly niched. I think you'll even come to the point where Walmart will perfect their systems and you won't see a crowd of Walmart. You might see a crowd of Walmart as people drive through to pick up their groceries, their car inside the building, which is now just nothing but a warehouse. That's really what it is anyway. Okay, so this paradigm, I've spent some time on it, but it is quite important for you to see it because it's basically a way for us to see and understand some of these changes that are going on, and the impact of the information systems on and how they mesh is really important. Now, I think I probably shared this example, but it's one that just tells me so much about how these systems are all evolving, and they're really all about using MIS and using IT in the most effective way possible. Back in the tornado in Moore in 2013, our church was right there off of 27th and I-35, and so we were kind of the triage place. And it was just amazing to see that all come together. People on the job were the people from the BGCO, and then other people, insurance companies, FEMA, and the folks at FEMA sat down, and I was supposed to be handling the kind of the inbound logistics of all of that. Different people at the church there volunteered their services. And so we called the people up at FEMA, and the people at FEMA put us on a conference call with folks at Walmart. And the guy at Walmart said, "We're already loading stuff. We've got stuff on the way. We know what you need." And so he said, "I'm going to email you a list of stuff that you're going to get day 1, day 2, day 3, because they've been through this experience enough times that they knew here's what people need." Okay? And that was like, whoa, okay? And as it came in, they told us, load this, put this stuff, and we opened up the bottom of our church, and people could come through just like, it was like a station. They could go in outside in the parking lot. They could go to insurance. They could get a meal. They could come through. And sure enough, the first day or two, people wanted heavy boots. They wanted electric chainsaws. They wanted lights, shovels, because they're in that phase. And at day 4, 5, 6 and on, it just flowed through. I was completely shocked. But then I realized, they've been through this enough times. And I asked the people at FEMA, I said, how did they figure this out? They said, well, they figured it out from what people ordered or needed or wanted when they've gone through these disasters. Plus, they had sales data in terms of what people were buying before a storm would occur. And they started mixing and matching them together, and they built this model that they have. And it was absolutely blowing my mind. So this is just we really haven't seen the end of this, but from a strategic standpoint, those 5 forces, okay, that a company has to deal with will be your job to think through, okay, who's out there, who's on the radar that could, a supplier, what's our relative bargaining power with them? Who are potential new market entrants, etc. And that gives you kind of an overview. Chapter 3 is a really important, it's a very, very important piece of all of this for the simple reason that it gives you that overview from a strategic standpoint of why we try to mesh all these systems together. And now, it's a lot easier said than done for a couple of reasons, and you'll see this as you work through the book and work through the cases. You get a lot of issues like, I guess what I would call technology layering. Everybody will get one email and they'll use it, and then they'll get another email client or another database client or this or that, or we all have bought Dells, and now this year it's Apples, and the next year there'll be Chromebooks. And you start getting all these layers, and trying to get that tied together becomes a problem. There's another issue, and it's probably the more important one or the more difficult one, and that's what we call the siloing effect. And that is where departments will develop their own IT and information sets, and they don't share. Now, there's a film I saw, it's been about 6 months, maybe a year ago. It was on Hulu. It was called The Looming Tower. And it's a movie about 9/11. And there's some naughty stuff and some bad language and some violence and all that. But the interesting thing was what it really highlighted was the fact that you had these 2 competing agencies, the FBI and the CIA, who had information that if they have just shared it, you would have known what was going to happen. But because the information was siloed, they wouldn't share. And within the FBI, it's even worse because the regional offices of the FBI, they all, when the FBI was set up, and J. Edgar Hoover, who was I think he was the director for nearly 30 years, he liked to see those regional offices compete. So they started siloing their information. And there was a regional office that had the Phoenix area where you had this guy who called the FBI and said, I have like these 3 people who don't have a pilot's license who are coming in here to learn how to fly a 747 or whatever those planes were. Would that not set off an alarm that was reported, and nobody did anything? Because they didn't want to share. The people in the CIA knew that bin Laden and his operatives were meeting in Indonesia. And when bad people, when you have the mafia and everybody in the mafia, all the families get together, they're not getting together to plan a church social. Something's up. And they didn't share. So you had, the FBI had information, so that siloing effect can be a real problem. And I can't understate that enough. Well, chapter 3, walks us through some of those ways, those strategies that people will follow in terms of their basic competitive strategies. And they give you those 4, okay? And each of those have their advantages, they have their disadvantages. It's just hard to say how will technology change how Apple does its business. All right, Facebook was rolling along, and now Facebook gets hammered every day because of all of these the Russian intrusion into our elections and all these fake sites and all of the bots that are out there. And $300 or $400 million in fees later, Facebook is going, we're really sorry, but they were raking in the money when those sites would pay for advertising. And the New York Times, I think I might have shown you guys last week, there's an article over there which will ask you which of these is fake, which of these is real. I think we talked about that last week. Anyway, as you come down here, you're going to see And again, these figures are very important because they kind of give you the bird's eye view of all of this stuff that's going on in here. In the text where we talk about, okay, I got to tie payroll to this, and I've got to tie these these systems together, and I've got to do enterprise computing and all of that. As a decision maker, what am I to do to make of that? Because it can seem very highly complex. Well, the figures in this table, okay, helps you put that into perspective, especially the impact of the internet. Now, what's really taking this into an entirely different level is the advent of smartphones. Now, you can compute anywhere. You can go to school anywhere. You can make financial transactions anywhere. Your phone, by the time you get to be my age, your grandkids will laugh at you when they see pictures of you with your phone. They'll go, how stupid you are to carry that thing around. We don't do that. Just like you guys take a look and go, who watched black and white TV, or who listened to radio? I remember my father talk about radio shows. The family would gather around and listen to radio and go, who listened to radio? That technology will change, and as it becomes more and more embedded, it's going to become more obsequious, and you're going to walk into a room maybe in your hotel. You'll put in you'll have maybe a hand, maybe a palm recognition, boom, and you're ready to compute. You don't have to have a device. The devices are all embedded. Okay. Think about all of these machines as they get older and older and older. What sales data? I bet there's probably in this lab, in terms of what they pay for these computers, there's probably $250,000 or $300,000 of sales. Does Dell know that they've got that much stuff sitting here that's getting old and probably needs to be replaced? Well, if our IT people forget, or if Dell forgets, or both forget, lost sales. But if the machines have a chip embedded in them that's sending it back to the server saying, hey, I'm 10 years old, I'm 12 years old, come rescue me. Maybe a sale. Who knows? Well, there's some good stuff in chapter 3, and I want to encourage you not to lose that. Smart products, they talk about that thing, the Internet of Things, the smart products. It's some of it, again, I'm a technology geek, so I love it. Some of it I like, some of it I don't. Bought a new refrigerator, and my wife was going, buy the one that has, let's go online, all this stuff. And I don't want that. I just want the one that has that door I can open so I can get a beer out and I'll keep the rest of the fridge. I don't buy it. That's a joke, okay? But I want the one that I can open up and all this stuff. But I don't need the one. I've got enough devices, okay? Now, I work with computers all the time. You put me on a phone, I'm going, but my wife is saying, I love my phone. It's just all this stuff. I'm going, what does this do? So, smart products, that's going to be something that who could even predict? But how will a particular industry, or how will you take part of that, and how will you take advantage of it, or will your firm get trounced pretty badly because it didn't pay attention to these types of things? So there are some interactive sessions here, but I wanted to go through Porter's model, talk about that, and really get you focused on, of all of the chapters in the text, I think chapter 3, particularly as you talk about Porter from a strategic standpoint, is probably the most important, because that Porter model helps us ask some questions that once answered give us a heads up in terms of using our information tech, our IT, and our management information systems in the proper way. Again, management information systems are decision-centric. If they're not giving you information to make decisions, they're not doing their job. They're no good. They're of no use. You're spending money on something that you're wasting. If you're a publicly traded firm, you're wasting the company's money. If you're a church, you're wasting the money of the people who tithe and give their offerings, because that's what IT should do. a management information system should tell you those things. And they should help you make decisions. If it doesn't, and at the core, if you go back and you take a look at the Porter model, when you answer those questions, that gives you a sense of the competitive landscape. Now, you'll hear a term out there called business intelligence. Business intelligence is the way that we take those questions that Porter poses to us, and we go out and we get that information and we put it into some type of dashboard, which is really nothing more than some kind of screen that has some data on it or information that helps us see how we're doing. Okay, I'll give you an example. A good friend of mine went to high school. She's up in Montreal now. She runs a hedge fund for pharmaceutical companies, and she's scary smart. And her company, one of the things they do is they have a bot that goes through patent filings in the United States and in Canada, really in the Western world. It's a bot, and it goes through patent filings and licensures looking for stuff that's promising. And she'll get a ding on her computer and go, oh, here's something that looks like a very promising cure, a drug for Alzheimer's. And if they start to do a little bit of investigation, she'll send a team. And then if the team says, hey, we might have something, then they start to talk to that company, and they start to try to link them up with maybe another fund or a couple of funds give out, or maybe they come in and say, we have a deal for you. They're looking for what you call these unicorns out in the biomedical field, just like people out in Silicon Valley are looking for what they call the unicorns with what's the next app? So you guys, I don't know where, your grandparents and me probably are all on Facebook. I don't know, you guys are probably in hiding. Or maybe you've got your own secret site you go to now so you can post your party pictures and all of that. And while we're up, we're exchanging recipes and are fighting about, the elections and all this stuff. You guys are probably doing cool stuff on your own social websites. Twitter, at one time, a very in vogue thing. So everybody's got a Twitter account. So where will it lead? Who knows? But you need to answer those questions if you're going to make use of MIS, especially because MIS is designed, I can't say it enough times, it's designed to be decision-centric, to help you make decisions. And that's what it's meant to do. And the chapter does a very good job here. Now, in the opening case about AT&T versus Verizon, I'll talk about that just a little bit because I have been a student of the phone companies for a long time. My sister worked for AT&T for 30 plus years. My brother-in-law was the vice president of AT&T, so I know the company pretty well. I'll give you an example. My sister, the last 5 years of her career, she was she did adjustment projects. So what's an adjustment project? Let me tell you. Think of this. Think of a company so big that they acquire a customer and they forget to bill them. I guarantee you, if you breathe, it'll be you. And we can bill you, we will bill you. But think of it, the company's so big. And so her job was, they'd find somebody hadn't paid long distance bills in 10 years because somebody set up the account and forgot to send the thing over to accounting and say, hey, here's your customer. Because you're rolling along with 25, 50 million customers, you're not missing them. So her job was to go in and put a team together to go talk to that business and go, you owe us about $100,000. Of course, so the companies would always says, gee, I kept wondering when you'd send me a bill. So that was an interesting process for her for the last 5 years. So AT&T is the remnants of the old original Bell Telephone Company. And so as they've switched and changed and moved on out of that mode, AT&T at one point was really two kinds of companies. One, what they called the Reeboks, the regional bells, phone companies. Then the other was Bell Labs. These are the people who did innovative research in using, developed telephones and all the products they developed. They broke those two up, and the Reeboks are still out there, like Southwestern Bell and people like that. And you have Verizon. And when you look in that case, you're going to see that AT&T and Verizon are like a lot of phone companies. They're very, very, very nervous. Why? Because people are cutting their landlines. They're just like cable companies. Folks are cutting their landlines, and folks are using cell phones. And sometimes, if you don't have the device, you won't get their business. AT&T sells a lot of iPhones. Why? Because they did everything they could to get a strategic alliance with iPhone with Apple, because then Apple would sell a bunch of iPhones. Sprint and other folks, other competitors of AT&T, said, okay, we'll go with Google and with the Android and with their operating systems. And there's that battle. So that big battle that goes on between Verizon and AT&T, they're both trying to fight to survive. And you want to take a look at it. And I'd say once you read the case, and once you've read it, go out some and do a little bit of a search and see what's going on with AT&T. They've made some major acquisitions. They've had a few that they've tried to do that went awry. And it's the same story with the cable companies. They're trying to figure out, what do we do? Now, if you've ever taken, and if you've taken the ESPN course I offer in J-Term, it's a fun course, but it's also, ESPN's an interesting company to start with. But they were really the game changers. At one point, to get on cable, to have a show on cable, you paid the cable company to have your program. Just like advertisers would support somebody to put a program on one of the three networks. ESPN came along and said, we don't like that model because we've got 24-hour-a-day programming. You don't have to pay for actors. You've got athletes. You don't have to go recruit a studio. You've got universities and colleges and professional programs. We've got an unending story. And since we do, it's all full of drama, all of that, you're going to pay us. You will pay us to sell you content. And that flipped everything. HBO was the next to say, hey, if you'd like to, we're going to put together AT&T. HBO was for a lot, and still is to a certain extent, heavily involved in boxing. And they went to the cable people and said, gee, if you'd like to see this match, this bout, you could pay us. I remember the early days of cable. In fact, when I was in Norman as I was finishing school, Norman got cable. I had a box on my TV that was about the size of this screen, and cable was on 5 hours a night. And you had a stable, and somewhere around midnight, then the dirty movies came on, and at 2 o'clock it was finished. But you got HBO, and then they started there's comedy specials, and you had some other programming, but it was on, you paid like $30 a month to have 5 hours of programming. And I did it just because I wanted to see, what is this critter going to evolve to? And well, HBO is what it is. Then you have all these other competitors of them. This is one of my favorite chapters in this text for a very simple reason, that it takes us up from a lot of this just thinking about how do I get the payrolls done and how do I mesh that stuff together, to that bigger picture thinking to say, how do I take that model of a Porter and apply it using my MIS? And I think the last example I give you is probably the very best. Now, I'm a movie buff. I love movies. I am a classic movie fanatic. I love classic movies, the old movies. I think they're so far, every generation likes movies. I could say I think that's why they're classics. Now, there's a company, and you probably all have heard of them, Turner Classic Movies, that has programming. Here's how Turner got started. There's a man named Ted Turner. He's still alive. And Ted Turner, at the end of the 1980s, saw the major studios in Hollywood were closing their doors. At one time, Hollywood was known as the Dream Factory because every studio would take people and they produced movies. And these old-time movie stars, they might be in 15 movies a year. If you went to work for some of, like I said, MGM, which was the gold standard supposedly, if you went to work for them, they'd put you on a contract. They'd teach you how to speak. They'd change your name. They might teach you how to ride a horse, shoot a gun, rattle a saber. They did all this to produce a persona, you, the star. They'd go back and change your birth records or anything you could do to give this story about you as a star. And they were just a gigantic, they're like factories. Well, that all changed in the 60s and 70s as you had the rise of the so-called independent producer. What happened was as those companies like Paramount and MGM started to be bought off or pulled apart, Disney, etc. Ted Turner's sitting back and he's watching. And he says, I noticed something very interesting. Late at night, all over the country, somewhere around about 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, when local stations need content after the Tonight Show and whatever else was on, they need content. They're showing old movies. At Christmas time, they're showing, the Jimmy Stewart movie? What's that? It's a Wonderful Life. In other words, Miracle on 34th Street, or whatever it was. And you'd see these movies, and the ratings for them would be off the roof. So he started buying up those movie rights. And he started buying catalogs. He bought the entire catalog that had been originally created by Humphrey Bogart and in his company. He bought one catalog of it after another, and pretty soon he owned all of those old movies. And he said, I'm going to start a cable station. I'll start a cable network, and I'm going to put this on cable, and I'm going to be, and then people took it from there, and it's probably one of the most, probably has one of the highest brand loyalties that anybody could ever possibly have. And if you ever go over to their message boards, people are insane. They're in love with Doris Day. They're in love with Rock Hudson. They're in love with Clark Gable, and they sell all these things. They have these movies and all these. It's interesting. Turner was a genius because he bought those catalogs, and because he owned them, he could show them over and over and over, and he could mix and match. And I believe that probably that company is still in the process of buying catalogs. Not only that, but they've gotten themselves into restoration. When you think about it for a moment, a movie is really nothing more than a digital product. So you find, and one of the things they do a lot of is finding old movies, silent movies, movies from Europe, and restore them. And some of them they restore fully to digital using HD, and it will blow your mind. But when you see those movies, and particularly the black and white movies and how people use them so artistically, you go, whoa. But he understood that as a catalog. And I'll end up with another one of these, because these are people who are thinking strategically. Many of you probably have never even heard of Herb Albert and the Tijuana Brass. Maybe you've heard the music, but you've never heard of him. He became very popular in the late 60s and early 70s, and he was very smart. He would always keep the copyright and ownership of his catalog of music, so he had control of it. As he got popular, he started buying the catalogs of other people, And as he developed artists, if you signed with his label, which was quite good at marketing and quite good at distribution, you gave them a portion of the rights to your catalog. So if you're Janet Jackson, for example, or a Michael Jackson, he owned a piece of that catalog. So owning that catalog meant what? I can sell it to people and charge people for it. Now, he started his company, if I remember, and I wish I would live long enough or had the chance to write a book about his business acumen, because he's brilliant. I think they started with $150,000, and it's been about 10 years ago. It was A&M Records, him and another gentleman by the name, I believe, of Morris, and they sold that the catalog for $867 million. Not bad, not a bad payday. And they just sold content, songs, intellectual property. So again, you could see how this bigger picture thinking brings us to a point where we can take the MIS and do some creative things with it, but you've got to kind of understand that Porter model and get a feeling for it, so that the rest of these chapters, as we talk about how I tie these systems together and so forth, will have some meaning. Listen, I appreciate those of you who are here, and I'm going to stop here and see if anybody have any questions I could try to answer for you. Anybody? Anybody out in screencast land? I see one person has already fled. Okay. Well, you know what you've got ahead of you next week, this week. And I've been looking at your responses. They look pretty good. If I see something that look funny, I'll say something. Otherwise, if I'm seeing things that look good, meet what I'm after and what I think is a benefit to you, we're good to go. You're going to notice we do a lot of cases, and that's because this course is more like a policy course than it is one where we teach you to compute or do something like that. Okay? Now, if no one has any questions, I'm going to shut it down here. I appreciate you being here, and we have a virtual Wednesday coming up Wednesday. Okay? Thank you much, folks.